In 1998 in New York, Shante Kimes and her son Kenny were facing charges for the murder of an elderly socialite and were suspected of carrying out at least 2 other killings.
The media has so far portrayed us totally like we are not. We're just a mother and son.
In a way, they're the perfect crime team. She was the brains behind the operation, and he was the guy that was sufficiently big and muscular to actually do the dirty work.
Shantae's eldest son, Kent, grew up surrounded by his mother's crimes.
I knew about the cars, I knew about the shoplifting, I knew about some of the scams we were trying to run and stuff. I knew they were up to no good. But the thought of murder never crossed my mind.
Thinking about family members, their loss, their grief, and their trauma oftentimes gets overlooked because they sort of get bundled up with the perpetrators and they get forgotten as actual victims themselves.
I still love them today as much as I ever have. I'm ashamed of what they did. It goes against everything I believe in as a Christian, but I still have the same love for them in my heart.
Shante Kimes was born in 1934, but even to her family, her past was mysterious.
My mother's childhood is a blur, and I think it always will be, because there's just been so many stories told through the years, and there's been so many fabrications. It's really hard to dissect it to find out what the truth is. Recently, I was found by a long-lost cousin, of all things, and she is into genealogy, and she actually knew more about my mother's childhood than I did, and found out that Mom was basically a street kid in Los Angeles, as far as we know.
She used to steal cheese from food stalls to survive, and it was during these years as a street urchin that she became acutely aware of the huge disparity between the wealth of Hollywood and the harsh reality of her own life. And this made her want to be someone and to rise in the world, and that had a deep influence on her moral compass as life went by.
At one point, she said we were French, and then we weren't French. Another thing is, too, is she always said that we came from, like, a royal bloodline in India. And so she would always call me her little princess, and I didn't really believe that. I was just like, oh, she's just being sweet, But she was, like demanding on it and, like, determined to make me believe that.
Was there a nugget of truth in there? What a confusing concoction of storylines to try and make sense of who am I in relation to this woman and who is she in relation to me?
She really was 2 different people, because the mother figure was great, fantastic. She could be very sociable, very welcoming, very affectionate, actually. But when the criminal Shante came on stream, she was something completely different, totally ruthless in pursuit of whatever it was that she wanted at that time.
As far as shoplifting, she never made me shoplift. She tried to get me to do it, but just, But she showed me how to make money. She goes, here's what you do, here's a quarter. So I went, she goes, go buy the newspapers. And so I put the quarter in, instead of taking out one paper, she took all the papers out. And then she'd have me sit in front of the store and sell the papers, for pocket money.
If a parent is coming across as chaotic, destabilizing, all over the place at times, loving at other times, what can a child really do? They are in a powerless position. He's caught as a child in her web.
She ultimately regarded theft as simply part of what life was all about. And she used to steal fur coats from stores. She'd steal the best-looking luggage from airport carousels. She would just routinely shoplift.
One time, Mom was, quote, shopping, and I'm sitting on the hood of her car. All of a sudden, Mom is running out the door with bags in her hands. He said, get in the car, get in the car. So I stood up. By the time we got there, the store manager caught her. Said, you stole those dresses, and you're not going no place. Mom started getting at me. I'm so insulted. You accused me of doing that and stuff like that. Well, then we started hearing the sirens. I was like, uh-oh. And Mom, I remember Mom looking. I remember seeing the twinkle in her eye. It wasn't a planned out deal. It was just a reflex. And she balled up her fist and she punched me in the mouth as hard as I've ever been hit and since her before. My lips split open. I still have the scar I can feel on the inside. Blood's gushing. Now, the cops jump out of the car and Mom starts saying, this hit my son. Accused the manager of hitting me when she's the one that did it.
How can you possibly do that? You're supposed to be a parent. But I don't think somebody like Shantae necessarily sees people in that way. She sees people as these are objects that I can move around and use. So this is for her own personal gain.
The police said, well, we need a question. I said, no, I'm taking my son to the hospital. I'm taking my son to the hospital right now. And she throws him in the car. She gets in the car, drives out the driveway. The hospital's to the left. She takes a right. And we stop at one of her doctor friends, and he stitches me up in his living room, and then we'll go home. So she got away with it. The thing is, she got to keep the dresses. She's thrown in the back seat.
It wasn't just theft Shantae was involved in. She always had a con on the go. And from an early age, she involved Kent.
When I was younger, I was small. I could fit through windows. And Mom wouldn't make me take valuables. She wanted me to get papers all the time.
She was quite well informed on how to forge documents, create fraudulent signatures, and all the other things that were required to be a successful conwoman.
She was a beautiful woman. She always looked really classy, always wore white. She had this big, beautiful black wig, and it looked good on her. And when she would walk into a room, it went one way or the other. One, everybody just got excited. It was just like everybody was lit up, And then there were other times when it was just terrifying when she would come into the room.
All of her relationships were basically based on the same formula, that she was the domineering character, and they were the guys who went along with everything she said.
There's not one man that she met that didn't have to tell me how beautiful my mother was. I know, okay, fine, she's good looking, that's good, but she just had that kind of charisma.
In 1970, in Los Angeles, Shantae set her sights on property millionaire Ken Kimes.
He was simply unable to get out of her grasp. It was simple as that. He was a very insecure fellow.
It made him feel like a king. This showered him with attention, and it was just simply her reeling in her millionaire. It worked. She did it. The thing it was crazy is that my stepdad's a multi-millionaire. Mom's still shoplifting groceries. Suspicion doesn't usually fall on multi-millionaire wives and stuff like that, and she played it to the hill.
Shantae is on record as saying that why should I steal other people's money when we've got so much ourselves? We're loaded. That's the term she used. We're loaded. So why should I steal from anyone else?
Eventually, Shantae's love of crime rubbed off on Kent.
This is the house where Mom, Ken, and I became a family. It wasn't a huge house, but the location, incredible. It was nice. It was really nice. This is a house we lived in when I got busted for stealing surfboards. So that was an eye-opener, you know.
I got caught stealing surfboards, and dead to rights, horrible thing to do. Well, I got home from school the next day, and the wrath exploded. You know, I was getting cussed out, you and all this stuff. And I said, Mom, I'm sorry. I'll never steal anything again. She said, I don't care if you steal anything, just don't get caught. I'm like, whoa. And I was young enough then not to understand, but old enough to understand that there's something going on here. This isn't right.
From his point of view, psychologically, that is really messed up. You know, what is right, what is wrong? And I know what's right from wrong, but this adult is saying, no, just never get caught. Very confusing message.
When I got in trouble for that was the end of my criminal career. You know, the words defining moments, it's so overused. But for me, it was, you know, at the time, I hated it. I'm still ashamed of it. But in some ways, it might be the best thing that ever happened in my life.
Although it was the end of Kent's criminal activity, when his younger brother arrived, Shante had a new protege, and the two of them ended up killing together.
Kenny made Mom more dangerous. Mom was plenty dangerous before Kenny turned into what he became. But as far as I know, there wasn't premeditated murders, crimes of this intensity before they became partners. But Kenny brought an intensity that took her bad qualities and made them fierce.
For conwoman Shante Kimes, wealth and a waterfront home were not enough. Her husband Ken needed to be more than simply a millionaire. She had images of grandeur in her head.
She was acutely aware of status all the time. She was very impressed by anybody who had a title.
She got letterhead that made it sound like Ken was a bicentennial ambassador, you know, and it worked. So all of a sudden, when they made reservations for dinner, it wasn't Mr. Kimes, it was Ambassador Kimes. You know, and it worked. We got nice tables and stuff.
They actually met Gerald and Betty Ford on one of the occasions when Ken was in his ambassadorial role, and he actually introduced himself to the Fords as an ambassador, when of course he wasn't an ambassador in any real sense. And there's a famous photograph of them with the Fords where Ken and Shante are trying to ingratiate themselves with the Fords, and the Fords are looking on with barely disguised disdain. This fed into the persona that she wanted to create.
Now that she'd achieved an exclusive lifestyle, Shante Kimes was determined to hang on to it. She had a plan.
Mom was gone for a while. I didn't know where Mom was at. I had no idea. And well, I got home from school and there's Mom. And she sits me down and says, I got some really good news for you. You'll be so excited. And with Mom, at that point, I'd learned that good news for her wasn't always good news for me. What is it? She goes, you have a little brother. What? This is real. And I got mad. That's one time I blew up because I said, people don't live like this. This isn't the way you find out you got a brother. I mean, don't you see how weird this is?
Once Kenny was born and brought home, things did calm down a little bit. Ken was a very doting father, but still you knew that the reason why Mom got pregnant was to have the heir to his fortune. Gave her the power to control his money in case anything happened.
He has a very different upbringing, I think, to Kent. From Shantae's perspective, Kenny can do no wrong, but he also appears to be being raised in a hermetically sealed world that she has full control over. You know, she chooses who his friends are. He's homeschooled. He's kept very, very close to her.
I loved playing the role of bigger brother. You know, there was 12 years difference between us, so it wasn't like we're bonding like most brothers do. But I had a lot of fun, and he had a lot of fun.
I loved my uncle very much. He was a little crazy. He liked to play pranks. I do remember he liked to jump off the roof and jump into the pool, which was crazy, but I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Kenny had an unreasonable expectations of what he was entitled to. He didn't know you had to work for a living. He thought you can get whatever you want. It was okay to steal from people.
Shante behaves in ways around him that are all about rule-breaking, mistreating others. So he's witnessing all of this stuff. And guess what children do? They learn from their parents.
When Kent got married in 1983, he extricated himself from his family and became a father for the first time.
Mom was just getting too crazy. And I went off and ended up in the Army on my own. I hadn't talked to Mom for almost a year. And she didn't even know that my daughter was born. And then phone rings, there's Mom. And they're in town. They say, hey, yeah, we can come see you. And, well, I got some news for you. You know, so you're your grandmother.
I called her Grandma, but I also called her Babish. I know she loved being a grandmother. She went full out on gifts and making you feel loved.
They had the most fun, loving grandma, fun grandmother there was. Kenny was bigger than life, always laughed and stuff like that, easy to play with. They worshipped him.
One of my favorite memories of her, it was on my 10th birthday, and I got really excited because I knew she was about to do something cool.
I pulled in my house, I hit the garage door opener, and there's a horse sitting in my parking spot. I go, what? My mom went out and bought a horse for her birthday without even talking to me about it.
Babish, she had a glass of champagne and was trying to give it to the horse, and we winded up naming the horse Champagne and Ribbons. So that one was really cool. It was awesome. I miss her.
I think somebody like Shante is a huge con artist. There's a lot of misdirection here. You're busy looking at the pretty things that she's giving you, and she's misdirecting you from what she's actually up to and how she's actually using you to get what she wants.
I have a lot of good memories with Mom, but one of the ones that illustrate to me just how loving she could be was we were in the Bahamas, and my daughter was pretty young at the time. She was upset because she couldn't find any shells on the beach.
She saw me and how sad I got, and the next morning she told me, like, she's like, go look for some more shells. And I was like, no. And she's like, no, go. And so I went and found the most beautiful exotic shells. You know, they were just gorgeous.
Wow. That's the biggest one I've seen. Let me see that.
Mom went down to a store and she bought a big bag of seashells, and she sprinkled them on the beach, and woke up the next morning and told my daughter, hey, there's shells on the beach.
When she did stuff like that, I mean, I know she was doing it out of love and to be sweet, but I actually believed her, you know? So I thought that there really was magic, and, you know, I really thought all these other things that she told.
I think what we see with Shante is her over-the-top gestures of generosity, which, you know, when you're the child of or the grandchild of somebody like this, you see that as markers of love and affection. Look at what I've done for you. And these huge displays, I think, have a darker underbelly, because I think they're conditional. I do this for you, and what are you going to do for me?
One thing that my grandma did is she was telling me there was this mean lady laying on the beach. And she said, "That's a mean lady, Christina." And she's like, "I need you to do something for me." And I was like, what? And she was like, "I want you to go over and I want you to grab her headset and her cassette player. I want you to grab it and I want you to run back here as fast as you can." And I was like, okay, you know, really confused. And she was like, "I'll give you $100 like that." And I was like, okay, like that. I just didn't understand. She kind of turned it into like a game even. And so by the time I went over there to the poor lady, I was kind of giggling and laughing, and I winded up grabbing it and I ran as fast as I could back to the house. The lady was so mad, so angry. She came up to the house, started banging on the door, and then I got really scared. And I was just like, you know, I was terrified. And then Babish went and talked to her and started yelling at her. And then she came over to me and she was like, "I'm so proud of you. I love you so much. You did a great job."
Having spent her whole life conning, manipulating and stealing in pursuit of anything that took her fancy, amazingly, Shante Kimes had never faced the consequences.
Mom had gone to court several times, but with her charisma, her ability to lie, to sway people, they never can get a conviction, no matter what. No jury would convict her.
In 1985, that changed.
I was in the Army, a helicopter pilot, and I got a phone call from Kenny, and he's hysterical. I've never heard him so hysterical. I said, "What's going on?" And, "Mom and Ken just got arrested. Mom and Dad." I go, "What?"
She was first imprisoned for 5 years for enslaving Mexican maids. That was her first actual offence as recorded in a court. The other side of Shante was obviously she was a thoroughly nasty piece of work, and she would get quite wild with them and become really nasty. And she also physically restricted their freedom, which is where the enslavement bit came from. She was effectively using them as unpaid labor.
Mom had made the papers many times. She made the news, but she was never the headline. You know, she was never the big story of the day. She was this time.
Ken Kimes took a plea bargain to avoid jail, while Shante was imprisoned for 5 years. This wasn't to be the last time she'd make the headlines. Soon, it would be for murder.
She really sprang to worldwide prominence in 1998 after she and Kenny had murdered Irene Silverman in New York. And that's when it became a really big story, and when all the details of their con and kill schemes came into the open.
In 1994, Shantae's millionaire husband, Ken Kimes, suffered a sudden aneurysm and died.
She goes, "Kent, there's no will." Uh-oh. You know, I wasn't so worried about myself because I was a fairly successful businessman and stuff. But then I thought, okay, if she's destitute, where's it going to fall on? Me. And what she did, she got into safe deposit boxes, she went through the accounts, and there was no money. It was gone.
Not being able to find the missing millions, Shante and Kenny Kimes still had the house, but nothing else.
The only money that we actually found, I took a jacket of Ken's just to remember him by. I just happened to reach in my pocket and pulled out a bank book. It was about $500,000. So I gave it to her. And I guess that was a seed money. I don't know how she got it. But it was a Bahamas account.
For 2 years after his death, she did try to keep him financially alive. And that's when the Gulf Union Bank in the Cayman Islands became very interested in the activities taking place on Ken Sr.'s account.
Christina was a pawn for them a couple times. In fact, one time they were taking her to the Bahamas. I don't know how they talked me into doing this.
I was really excited, and we were checking in through the security part, and then all of a sudden, things just got really weird. People, were kind of skittish, some people running around. I remember looking behind me to see where my grandmother was and my uncle, and they were nowhere to be found. And I was really scared. I walked over to a payphone that was really close to it, and I called my mom, and then I see this cop, and he starts walking towards me quickly, and he's like, hang up the phone. And so, without thinking, I just, of course, hung it up, and he immediately asked me, where's the people with this bag or something like that. And I was like, I don't know, I can't find them.
They find a taser in Kenny's luggage, and Mom and Kenny take off and just left my daughter there.
It was one of the most horrible experiences of my life.
You've got to imagine what kind of mentality it takes to leave a child in that position. From my point of view, looking in, these are people who don't care about the fact that this is a child. Their sole focus is about themselves, their own safety.
They never apologized to me for leaving me there like that and abandoning me. But I thought that was normal. I thought it was normal to go from being super, super happy and excited and high on life, and then all of a sudden it's misery.
Christina had a lucky escape. That trip to the Bahamas is believed to be the first time that Shante and Kenny Kimes committed murder.
Mr. Ahmed was a senior official with the Gulf Union Bank, and he flew to Nassau to investigate activities taking place on Ken Sr.'s account. According to Kenny's account, because he was the one that eventually fessed up to the murder of the banker, they all went back to the house, they had a coffee. They by that stage recognized that the bank was going to be a major obstacle for them. And so they decided together to dispose of him. A date rape drug was dropped into his coffee. One of them filled the bathtub. They dragged him in a semi-comatose state into the bathroom and plunged him into the bathwater and held him under.
Bank official Mr. Syed Bilal Ahmed's body has never been found. Before his disappearance could be linked to them, Shante and Kenny Kimes returned to the United States. By 1997, they were destitute, and Kent took them in.
At first, it was the three of us, the three amigos, But the more I resisted what I knew was not right, and they were making financial mistakes. Kenny was shoplifting like crazy. Mom was shoplifting like crazy. I caught him going through the doors of the house. I had a meeting I had to go to, and I walk in my office, and Mom's sitting behind my desk, the drawers are open, and they're both glaring at me. This is when things were not good. The tension was building. Towards the end, I didn't try. That's why I kicked him out of the house. I got tired of hiding my ID, and telling, getting locks on the bedroom doors to lock them and stuff, not trusting them.
He remembers the last time that he saw them together.
They were in the process of crossing America, and they got word of this woman Silverman and the attractive mansion in a posh part of Manhattan, and that became their target.
Under a pseudonym, Kenny Kimes rented a room from Mrs. Silverman.
It's a very nice terraced mansion, and that was in Shantae's sights. She wanted it. That's precisely what she wanted in life. And she actually fooled herself into believing that she could get it by scamming the documents and by disposing of Mrs. Silverman.
On July the 5th, 1998, one of Mrs. Silverman's maids reported her missing.
We don't know where this woman is. Wherever she is, I pray to God she's all right.
That same day, Shantae and Kenny were arrested on an unrelated fraud charge. Detectives then found paperwork belonging to Irene Silverman, including a forged deed to her townhouse, in the Kimes' belongings, and weapons in their car. Suddenly, the pair were linked to her disappearance and other crimes.
Meantime, in Los Angeles, police want to question them in the murder of David Kasdan. Authorities say Kasdan transferred his home to the Kimes before being killed. And in the Bahamas, authorities want to question the Kimes in connection with the disappearance of a banker.
I was talking about Irene Silverman, had no idea who she was, never heard of her, anything. Then they talked about the bank in the Bahamas, had no idea. It didn't click with me about the timing with my daughter at the airport and stuff. But David Kasdan was a family friend for a number of years. I saw David Kasdan's name and murder in the same sentence. And I just like, oh man. I knew they did it. It wasn't a question of myth, maybe, I knew it.
It's all untrue. I mean, there's no truth to any of this.
On the 14th of February 2000 in New York City, Shantae and Kenny Kimes faced trial for the murder of Irene Silverman.
Jurors rendered a guilty verdict for Shantae and Kenneth Kimes after 4 days of deliberating.
The wave of emotion, the only thing bigger was the fear, or not the fear, the feeling of relief. And I got criticized for saying that before. You know, your mother and brother in jail for murder, you feel relieved. So you don't know the life I lived up to that point, you know?
It hit me so bad, I literally can't remember certain parts of my life. I would have dreams or nightmares, and I would be like, oh, that was a horrible nightmare. But then I would realize that they were actually memories.
Even in jail for murder, Shantae never stopped professing her innocence. British journalist John Marquis went to interview her.
When I met her in prison, the only crime she ever admitted to was actually stealing lipstick when she was a young girl. And I put all the other accusations to her. She denied knowing Mr. Ahmed, for a start, and she claimed that Kasdan was a great friend of hers. So she was in total denial of all these things.
The Kimeses are now facing extradition to California. They're accused of murdering a 63-year-old LA businessman after he discovered the two used his name to obtain a $280,000 mortgage.
It's one thing to read about a family member and say, these are the facts and this is what happened, but to come face to face with your flesh and blood must have a huge impact on Kent, because let's not forget, these are his family members. He is also part of that story. He can't separate from that.
They sent me in the visiting room, there's Mom. And I think it was the first time in my life I saw her outside the house without makeup. I sat down, you know, and once again, pleasantries, and I said, I saw Kenny. You know, I just saw him yesterday. Oh, it's so horrible what they're doing to him and stuff. I said, no, Mom, you did it. Okay, it's real. And then we started talking about the Castle trial coming up. I said, Mom, you can't fight this thing. Oh, we're gonna win that one. We didn't do that. I said, you're gonna kill Kenny. You're gonna kill your youngest son. You keep this up. And then I lost my anger management because she made a mistake. She said, we're innocent, Kent. I'm so innocent. I swore in the life of little Carson. And I blew up. Yeah, I jumped out of my chair and I want to try to put my hand through it, but I hit the plexiglass. And then the guard behind me stood up real quick. And I just told her, don't you ever, ever, ever do that again. It's my son. Don't swear in his life, ever. I was out of there in a half hour. I could not stand being in the same room with her.
Kenny kept his promise to Kent. At the trial for the murder of David Kasdan, he confessed, admitting that they'd killed him and the banker, Mr. Ahmed.
The plea deal was life in prison for him and taking execution off the table for Mom and him, as long as he confessed to everything.
When Babish was in prison, you know, I wrote her one letter. I found Jesus Christ and accepted him into my heart, and I got really happy and excited about it, and I wanted to share that with her. When she wrote me back, she said that she had too. And I was reading the letter, I was super happy, super excited. Like, it was horrible that she was in there, but at least, you know, there was some faith and hope. But then towards the end of the letter, she was talking about me contacting someone and that I would get $10,000 if I did it. When I read that part, I was done. It just hit me like, this has just gotta stop. This is hurting me.
It's kind of funny because I found out so much stuff about my family's tragedies through the internet. I came home from work, and my routine was always to check the internet and see what's going on. And I got an email from the prison she was at. And I went, uh-oh, because I never got one before from, like, Googled Shante Kimes and found out she died that day.
With my uncle, I didn't know how to talk to him. But I didn't believe that he was capable of murder. I didn't believe it. But actually, about almost a year ago, I was praying a lot, and I was like, you know, I wonder if I could just maybe try and write him, just kind of get an idea. And I did, and I gave him my number, and he called me. And it actually went really, really well. I still talk to him off and on, even today. And then recently, you know, he said something like, I'll never forget. He said, you know, Christina, don't feel bad that I'm in here. He's like, I'm a killer, and I deserve to be here. And when he said that, I was just, there's, even right now, like the pit of my stomach, like I feel like I just went down in the world's tallest roller coaster.
You know, I still catch myself wondering if I could have done something to prevent this. On Mom, no way. It was a freight train. Kenny, I might have. You know, I don't know. One thing I tell everyone, I try to teach my kids, you know, why do you do the right thing? And everyone thinks it's a complicated answer. It's not. It's because it's the right thing to do. Plain and simple. I found out that Kenny was transferred to a prison in San Diego. It's an hour and a half drive from my house. I haven't been there, and I don't intend to. I mean, I love him, but at the same time,
Hello there, this is Big Gunman from Berkeley last night. What I'm phoning about is to tell you exactly why I've done what I've done, right?
In July 2010, a double shooting led to what would become the biggest manhunt in UK history.
I was watching what was in effect a drama on television about my son.
I just remember like the storyline of my dad being on there, that he's basically on the loose.
I couldn't believe it. Like, that could have been me. It could have been my mum. It could have been anybody. And I found it quite shocking that he could do that.
The 37-year-old had become a killer.
Dialed 999 and told the operator that he was now, in his own words, hunting police officers.
I am hunting for officers now, right?
PC Rathband, sitting in his patrol car, was shot by Raoul Moat through the window of his patrol car.
Raoul Moat became Britain's most wanted as 160 armed police officers tried desperately to stop the shooting spree.
My mum was scared that he would come and hunt us down, so she decided that we were going to leave. We packed our stuff and left.
In September 2010, 2 months after Raoul Moat's rampage, his estranged daughter Caitlin started secondary school. Her father had been the biggest local news story of their generation, and her peers wouldn't let her forget.
Starting high school was quite a traumatic time. I felt like a lot of people were asking too many questions. Everybody was always up in my face, declaring who I was. And I got pushed into fights that I never asked for. And then, after a few years of being in there, I just gave in and I turned it into a horrible piece of work. And that was when I began truanting and attacking students and teachers and my parents.
That transition into secondary school feels like a devastating experience for her, because now people know who she is. They heard the stories.
Kids can be very cruel, and you're in the playground and everybody knows it's your dad that's done this. How awful is that?
In 1973.
Raoul Moat grew up in a very difficult and dysfunctional household. He never knew his father. He had a very difficult relationship with his stepfather, and his mother suffered from very severe mental health issues throughout her entire life. She was bipolar and she had incredible mood swings from one day to the next.
Parents are important to their kids. These are children's attachment figures. And when you don't have that, for a child, it can be deeply devastating. There's a bit of me that's missing. So Raoul didn't have a connection or attachment to his dad. And I think that affected him very, very deeply.
Not having a father was not good for a boy at that time. I understand from friends later that he sort of made up a father. He'd made up this sort of story that he was born abroad and his father was French and his father was a farmer and his early life had been on the farm. It was a way of retreating into a world of comfort and not the world he found himself in.
As much as he tried, Peter was not allowed anywhere near his young son.
I wrote letters. That led to nothing. I asked a member of the family to go around. That led to nothing. I asked a priest to go around. That led to nothing. I asked a neighbour to go round and talk some sense into her. That led to nothing. In the end, the way I dealt with it, I thought, well, I'll never know him as a child, but I will know him as a man. He will come to me, and I will welcome him with open arms.
Peter moved to London to start a new life, leaving Raoul in Newcastle.
He became quite an obsessive bodybuilder. We had a daily obsession with his calorie intake. He was obsessed about eating the right kind of foods and the correct amounts of food so he could bulk up as much as possible. And he also took a large number of steroids. And as he moved into his adult years, he had a string of relationships with different women. He fathered 5 children to different women.
The failure of his relationships meant history repeated itself. Raoul was not there for all of his children.
I genuinely grew up believing that my 2 younger brothers' dad was my dad. But something didn't feel right. I knew that there was no resemblance between the 2 of us. I felt a bit unsure. It wasn't until I got to about 6 years old that I got told by my mum's sister, my auntie, that he was not my dad at all. And she actually told me the truth.
I do remember looking at a photo and she told me his name and a little bit about who he was, that he was caring in some ways, that he was a good man and a good friend. But once he started looking at drugs and bodybuilding and hanging around with the wrong crowd, he then changed.
So from Caitlin's 6-year-old self, she now has to...
And then sexually assaulted my mum a few times and raped my mum. After they broke up, my mum found out that she was pregnant, and I think he knew about it. Apparently he went to my mum's address, or a address, and he threatened to kick me out of my mum, and he threatened to get people to beat my mum up. She actually got jammed in a door, but she got protected by her relatives.
Raoul never acknowledged Caitlin as his daughter.
I think he knew that I was born, and I remember seeing him a few times on the streets. I don't realise this up until now that I've been told, but my mum was saying that we went out to school or something and he was across the road. And I went across this road and my mum says, "No, you can't go over there. Come on, what are you doing on the road?" And I think he looked over and he knew exactly who I was.
In April 2010, Raoul was sent to prison for common assault on one of his children. He was sentenced to 16 weeks.
Moat developed quite a degree of paranoia about the police in general and Northumbria police in particular. Over the years, he developed a burning hatred, basically, of the police. He felt they were targeting him. He came to this view that the police were out to get him.
I can't drive down the street without the blue flashing lights, you know? You'd have stitched this up for years, you'd have been caught stitching this up.
In 2010, Raoul Moat was in prison for assault. His partner at the time was Samantha Stobbart. They'd been in a relationship for 6 years and had a child together.
While he was in prison, she also met a new partner, Chris Brown, who was a karate instructor. Samantha came up with this plan that she would tell Moat that Chris was actually a Northumbria police serving officer. She thought this was the perfect way that would keep Moat away from him. Sadly, because of his long-term hatred for the police, it was the worst thing she could possibly do.
He's been on to me, right, for years. He's hassled this, harassed this, he just won't leave us alone. She's had an affair with one of your officers.
You're sitting there in a cell, locked up for most of the time, can't do anything, can't get out, and you suddenly realise that you've lost your girl, you've lost your children, you've lost your business, and you've lost your home. Now that's a stressful situation for anyone. I mean, that's the kind of stress that gives people paranoia. It gives people psychosis, and it broke him. That's what happened. It just broke him.
He set on a plan for violent revenge. He was released from prison HMP Durham on the Thursday. He posted a Facebook message which made it clear what his intentions were. He said that he's no longer 21, he can't rebuild his life, and he stated quite chillingly, watch and see what happens.
When he came out, he was a ticking time bomb.
Right. Off the house, you wouldn't discuss anything, and she went straight this for one of your officers. Yeah. Right? Now, I've had enough. I've jailed made it so well, I've came out with different kids. You know what I mean? I've lost everything through you. Right? Just won't leave us alone, right?
I think he wasn't supported enough at all. I mean, he didn't have a dad. He had problems with his mum. He had problems with his relationships. And he just didn't have a very good social circle.
2 years before these events, he'd actually asked to see a psychiatrist. He didn't feel his life was progressing in the way he wanted it to. And he said that he was tired, he was anxious, he felt isolated, he felt angry, he found it very difficult to keep his cool. And he obviously understood that there was something not right there.
If he had seen a therapist, I think he could have somewhat been a better person.
Within hours of his release from prison, Raoul Moat had obtained a shotgun. At 2:40 a.m. on the 3rd of July, police received emergency calls about an incident in Birtley, just outside Newcastle.
The first reports that were sent to the police were there'd been a shooting. That in itself is a serious enough call to respond to, but more so when eventually the officers attended and realised that there was a fatality and another person there seriously injured.
The story is that he went round to where he'd heard that his girl and this man were, and he was listening to them talking in the house. It was a hot night, the window was open, and they were talking about him, and he didn't like what they were saying.
He lay in wait for them until they left the house to return to their own house. He shot Chris twice with the sawn-off shotgun. Samantha ran back inside to the property, terrified, and then as Chris lay severely and probably fatally injured, he walked up and calmly shot him a third time, killing him. He then turned and shot at Samantha through the window, severely but not fatally injuring her, and he then went on the run.
He meant to kill him. It was an execution, there's no question about it. Obviously, you can't condone that, but I've always wondered why he did it. You know, what drove him to it? What was his state of mind, you know?
Chris Brown was dead and Samantha Stobbart was badly injured. Raoul Moat was on the run.
As his father, I do try to understand why he did it. And I'm not making excuses, I'm just saying that this is what happened to him. I'm trying to understand the man he was, because he seemed to have a kind of Jekyll and Hyde approach, a character really, where some people thought he was lovely, but lovely people don't normally kill someone and mean to do it.
I know that my dad was a good person at heart when he wanted to be, and I know that he would do anything for anybody, but if you done him wrong, run. And I get that. Nobody should have to deserve to be shot, no matter who the person is, or be abused. None of these people deserved what they got.
There is that familial connection that is undeniable. So they both Caitlin and Peter acknowledge the biology of it. and they almost form a connection with that identity, that we are part of a family. And I think for both of them, they try and find the good, because in doing that, you're also finding the good in yourself. He wasn't all bad. There was something of him that it was kind, it was helpful, it was something. But they also both acknowledge the grotesqueness of what he did to other people.
Initially, the Berkeley shooting was thought to be an isolated incident, but early the following morning, Raoul Moat made a 999 call and declared war on the police.
But the fact of the matter is, I'm not coming in alive. You have hustled me for so many years. They come anywhere near.
Raoul Moat shot Sam Stobbart and killed her new partner. He had lurked outside this house where the pair were at a party.
It seemed to me like a crime of passion, from what I could understand. A crime of passion, but somehow the police were part of the story. The police, it seemed that he declared war on the police because he thought it was all part of a police plot against him.
He said that he had years of, in his words, being targeted by them, and he was now turning it around and he was targeting the police.
You don't want me to kill myself, but I'm going to give you a chance, because I am hunting for officers now.
It was rolling news then, rolling news for a week. And I sat sort of more or less, didn't go anywhere. I was glued to the television in case of developments.
It's unbelievable. You have a person who threatens the lives of any police officer who crosses his path. Unprecedented, totally unprecedented, because you know not only does he have the means to do it, because he has possession of a firearm, he also has the wherewithal to do it. Very, very frightening.
PC David Rathband, who was a traffic officer for Northumbria Police, had started his shift a few hours earlier. He'd been briefed, like all other officers across the force area, about the incident the night before. They'd been given information about the gunman who was on the loose and the car he was thought to be driving. He decided to position his patrol car on the junction of the A1, Western Bypass, and the A69, which is a spot just west of Newcastle. And he thought this would be a good area to try and park his car and keep an observation of passing vehicles in the hope of spotting the gunman.
This is part of the high visibility process, that decision that's been made. And unfortunately, the difficulty in making that decision is it puts your uniformed officers literally in the firing line.
I am hunting for officers now.
9 minutes after Moat had made that 999 call, David became aware of a figure to the left through his passenger window. But before he had time to do anything or react, Moat raised his shotgun and shot David twice in the head. Moat fled off into the night, and many other colleagues of David rushed to the scene to find him critically injured in the footwell of his patrol car.
Are you taking me serious now? I've just downed your officer at the roundabout at the west end of Newcastle.
Yes.
Yeah? Well, I'm going to destroy a few lives like you've destroyed mine.
The shooting of an unarmed police officer sent the media into overdrive. 24-hour rolling news report. After shooting 3 people, one of them fatally, Raoul Moat had disappeared into the countryside. His friends told detectives that he was a keen outdoorsman and knew how to survive.
Moat had chosen the perfect landscape to hide. The area around Rothbury is quite a rugged area in parts. There's woodland, forests, different landscape features, which meant that it was a particularly good area to remain hidden. On the Friday, around 7 days from the first shooting incident, there was a sighting of somebody matching his description in Rothbury town centre.
Raoul's father followed developments on the news. Determined to help his son, He continued phoning the police.
I was put through to someone fairly senior. He's quite blunt and he said, "What have you got for us? What have you got for me?" And I said, "Well, the only thing I've got for you is me." And I said, "There'll be a standoff. He won't surrender to you. You're missing a trick here. I think he will surrender to me." And he said, "Are you prepared to come up here and make a statement?" And I said, "I'll be in the car in 2 minutes if you say yes." And he said, "Well, leave it with me for the moment." He said, "I need to have a word with some other people." He said, "And we'll get back to you." And I thought, well, I'm getting somewhere here, you know, I'm getting somewhere here. And then I'd still got the television on, and then they suddenly said, "Raoul Moat has been sort of cornered down at the river bank."
He was spotted in the riverside area, just on the edge of the town centre. He was incredibly agitated. He had the shotgun with him. Police resources flooded into the area. They imposed an incredibly strict lockdown of the town.
They were saying, yes, armed officers are arriving. He's down on the river bank at Rothbury, and he's holding a gun to his head. And I thought, right, they're going to be on that phone to me any minute. And then the same person I'd spoken to came back on the phone, and he said, "There's been a development," he said, "and we've decided to deal with it in another way." And I said, "Are you crazy?" I said, "There is no other way." I said, "It's me." I said, "Or you'll have a dead body."
And I think at this point, Peter truly believes that he had a role to play that was positive, and he was denied that again. And I think this is, again, seeing Raoul as this little boy who he could save, and I can rescue him from this awful, tragic, messy, murderous situation, and I can finally hold my hand out and pull him out of that tragedy. But he couldn't. And I think this is the difficulty and the complication that Peter deals with, I think almost on a daily basis, that if only I was there. And I tried to help and I couldn't.
It was shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning where his demeanour changed and the police realised that something was going to happen. He had the shotgun right next to his head.
I think in the moment, I believed that that standoff wasn't going to last. One way or another, it wasn't going to end very well.
I was just sitting, watching the television, and I just thought, this is gonna, if they don't get me up there, this will end one way. And it did.
11 minutes past 1 in the morning, he shifted his body position. He pointed the gun straight at his head.
Wait, there is something. Shots fired.
There was a shot, there was a lot of shouting, there was confusion. Confusion amongst the television people, because they couldn't really quite see what was happening. It was very difficult.
And when he pulled that trigger, everybody in the room instantly looked at me, asking, "Am I okay?" And to be honest, I think I was all right. It was a shock, it was a big shock. But I felt relieved that I'm never gonna be threatened by this man ever again.
The next thing, they were saying an ambulance has arrived, he's been put in the ambulance. And for a minute, I thought, well, he must be alive if they're putting him in an ambulance. And I also thought that perhaps the gun didn't go off properly. You know, guns sometimes misfire. Then they said the ambulance is arriving at the hospital. And then they said he's been taken into the hospital, but his head was covered by a blanket. And I just thought, he's dead. They don't put a blanket over your head unless you're dead. And I switched the television off. I went to bed. and I sort of cried myself to sleep.
You can't miss somebody that you have never met, but that's when it comes down to the wanting. That's what I wanted to meet him. But after it happened, I did feel at peace, but in a way I felt lost, that I'm never going to be able to meet him at all.
When Caitlin started secondary school at the end of that summer, being Raoul Moat's daughter made her the focus of a lot of negative attention.
I grew up hating the way that I looked, because I looked just exactly like him, because it was around the same time. And I would let this go. And sometimes there was like letters that would say, "I'm angry at you, why couldn't you do the right thing?" And other times it was, you know, like, I've accepted this, but I still need to learn to move on.
My feelings for Raoul, all his life, and now that he's dead, was love. That's quite difficult for people to understand, because if you never met anyone, how can you love them? But it's a feeling. It's not right or wrong, it's just how it is. And I always felt love for him. And even when he committed these terrible crimes, that love was unconditional.
Caitlin now has a son of her own.
Having my son has helped to teach me exactly what I need to know about relationships, how to care for somebody. It gets all your emotions into it. I wanted to be able to prove my
children, and I